On this week's Vaticano, we follow Pope Francis to Turkey. Before that, a short visit to the European Parliament in Strasbourg to urge politicians to defend human dignity. We take part in an in-flight press conference. Take a look at a vigil to start the year the Church is dedicating to the consecrated life. Also, the 20th anniversary of the International Year of the Family is marked at the UN, and the Sacred Liturgy is celebrated in a new book, coming up on Vaticano.
Pope Francis traveled to Turkey from November the 28th to the 30th with one main thought in mind: dialogue. At his arrival in the capital city of Ankara, he was received by the state authorities, who took him directly to the tomb of the founder of the Republic, Ataturk. There he left a wreath of white and red roses. From there he went to the new presidential palace to meet and speak with President Recep Erdogan. He made his first call to dialogue as the way to peace.
Abbiamo bisogno di un dialogo.
Today, what is needed is a dialogue which can deepen the understanding and appreciation of the many things which we hold in common. Such a dialogue will allow us to reflect sensibly and serenely on our differences and to learn from them. There is a need to move forward patiently in the task of building a lasting peace, one founded on respect for the fundamental rights and duties rooted in the dignity of each person. To this end, it is essential that all citizens, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian, both in the provision and practice of the law, enjoy the same rights and respect the same duties.
From the necessity of dialogue between men and women and institutions to that among religions, Pope Francis addressed the Minister for Religious Affairs, reference point for all of the Muslim imams of Turkey.
Good relations and dialogue between religious leaders have in fact acquired great importance. They represent a clear message addressed to their respective communities, which demonstrates that mutual respect and friendship are possible, notwithstanding differences. As religious leaders, we are obliged to denounce all violations against human dignity and human rights. Human life as a gift of God the Creator possesses a sacred character. As such, any violence which seeks religious justification warrants the strongest condemnation, because the Omnipotent is the God of life and peace.
Perché l'Onnipotente è Dio della vita e della pace.
Day 2 from Ankara to Istanbul. First stop, the St. Sophia Museum and the Blue Mosque, both historic symbols of the city. Accompanied by the highest Muslim leader, the great Mufti, Pope Francis took off his shoes for the tour. He paused there in the mosque for a moment of silent prayer. On the flight back to Rome later, he would say that during this moment he asked God for an end to wars. The afternoon was then dedicated to the nation's minority Christians. Here at the Cathedral of the Holy Spirit, he met with Catholics for Mass. During his homily, he spoke of the numerous charisms of the Church, inspired by the Holy Spirit.
Quando siamo noi a voler fare la diversità,
when we try to create diversity, but are closed within our own particular and exclusive ways of seeing things, we create division. When we try to create unity through our own human designs, we end up with uniformity and homogenization. But if we let ourselves be led by the Spirit, however, richness, variety, and diversity will never create conflict, because the Spirit spurs us to experience variety in the communion of the Church.
Ecumenical dialogue was also central to the trip. Pope Francis spent much of the remaining 24 hours at the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, where the Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew lives. He participated first in the vigil prayer before the next day's feast of St. Andrew, patron of the Orthodox. Pope Francis spoke to the Patriarch as his brother in hope and asked his blessing for himself and for the whole Church of Rome. Day 3, November 30th, the Feast of St. Andrew, the Pope's final day in Turkey. Together, Patriarch and Pope participated in the Divine Liturgy, a solemn yet colorful celebration. The Patriarch and the Pope signed a joint declaration of intentions where they expressed their mutual concern for the situation in Iraq, Syria, and the Middle East. And they recognized the urgency of Christian unity and the need for a constructive dialogue with Islam based on mutual respect. From there, it was off to lunch and a quick meeting with young refugees living in Turkey before taking off again for Rome, thus concluding his 6th international trip since he began his pontificate in 2013.
These children come from across the Middle East and Africa. They are refugees now living in Turkey, Christian and Muslim, some with, some without parents.
I think it gives them a place to get to know each other, where they can play calmly. They learn English, they learn mathematics, and they try to carry out a normal life. Here, they can at least go to school and they can play. Because they are refugees, they aren't allowed to go to school. So this gives them that opportunity.
Pope Francis made it a point to meet with them. It was his final event before leaving Turkey.
Ho desiderato questo incontro con voi.
I wished to have this meeting with you. I wished to go to a camp, but it wasn't possible to meet with refugees. You who come from Turkey, from Syria and Iraq, from different nations in the Middle East and Africa, you are here in representation of hundreds of your peers, many of whom are refugees and homeless.
Dei quali profughi e sfollati.
For every Christian, to meet the Pope is a grace of God. I think that the late popes that we have in the church are all holy and good and wise leaders. And for us here in this country, where there are many foreigners, immigrants, refugees, we are a minority here in this country, the presence of the Pope is meant to give us courage to continue our Christian vocation, to be able to continue our Christian life. For these refugee children, I would say that even the Muslims are asking me to meet the Pope because they see in him a figure of hope, of goodness, and they all really are journeying to meet holiness and to listen to his word.
There was one little girl who wasn't able to be there. This 14-year-old from Syria is named Sarah, and this painting she made was chosen among all the children's at the Don Bosco Youth Center to be given to the Pope.
I made this picture in the name of the school to give it for the Papa, and this is my picture. This the Jesus and Don Bosco, and here I make it. Here we have the shy of Don Bosco, and the son of the Jesus. Yes, and we need the pace of our state.
Pope Francis said later that he would have liked to have visited a refugee camp while in Turkey, but for many reasons it wasn't possible. Stay with us after the break. We join Pope Francis on a visit to the European Parliament, and a vigil starts the year the Church is dedicating to the consecrated life. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano.
Pope Francis has made the shortest trip of his pontificate, but he delivered one of his most powerful messages. In roughly 5 hours in Strasbourg, France, he visited the European Parliament and the European Council. His words to the Assembly and Parliament carried a clear message of hope. He urged politicians to keep the common good and human dignity at the center of their actions.
It is a message of encouragement to return to the firm conviction of the founders of the European Union, who envisioned a future based on the capacity to work together in bridging divisions and in fostering peace and fellowship between all the peoples of this continent. At the heart of this ambitious political project was confidence in man, not so much as a citizen or an economic agent, but in man, in men and women, as persons endowed with transcendent dignity. I feel bound to stress the close bond between these two words, dignity and transcendent. To speak of transcendent human dignity thus means appealing to human nature, to our innate capacity to distinguish good from evil, to that compass deep within our hearts, which God has impressed upon all creation. Above all, it means regarding human beings not as absolutes, but as beings in relation. In my view, one of the most common diseases in Europe today is the loneliness, typical of those who have no connection with others. This is especially true of the elderly, who are often abandoned to their fate, and also in the young, who lack clear points of reference and opportunities for the future. It is also seen in the many poor who dwell in our cities and in the disorientation of immigrants who came here seeking a better future.
Man and his dignity as the basis for society led Pope Francis to urge members of the European Council to work for true peace. Minutes later, he was received again with a standing ovation.
Peace is not merely the absence of war, conflicts, and tensions. In the Christian vision, peace is at once a gift of God and the fruit of free and reasonable human acts, aimed at pursuing the common good in truth and love. This rational and moral order is based on a conscientious decision by men and women to seek harmony in their mutual relationships, with respect for justice for everyone. How then do we pursue the ambitious goal of peace? The path chosen by the Council of Europe is above all that of promoting human rights, together with the growth of democracy and the rule of law. This is a particularly valuable undertaking with significant ethical and social implications, since the development of our societies and their peaceful future coexistence depends on a correct understanding of these terms and constant reflection on them. This reflection is one of the great contributions which Europe has offered and continues to offer to the entire world.
He returned to Rome that very same day. On the flight back, journalists had the chance to ask Francis questions. One focused on ISIS and other terrorist groups, and if the world should even spend time trying to dialogue with them.
It might not be possible to have a dialogue, but it is never good to close an open door. It might be hard, almost impossible, but the door remains open, right? You have used twice the word threat. That is true. Terrorism is a dangerous threat, and slavery is also a real threat. It has been installed into our societies already. Mistreatment, trafficking of children is a drama. Let us not close our eyes in the face of that. Slavery today is a threat.
He also confirmed another visit to France, this time to confirm Catholics in their faith.
It is not planned, right? But I would have to go to Paris for sure. Another suggestion would be Lourdes.
A year of consecrated life began in the Catholic Church on the first Sunday of Advent. The night before, on November 29th, at the Roman Basilica of St. Mary Major, thousands of faithful participated in this prayerful vigil. It marked the beginning of the liturgical year and was presided over by the heads of the Vatican's Congregation for Consecrated Life. 50 consecrated men and women participated in the entrance procession, carrying lamps with them in memory of the Second Vatican Council. Young people and brothers of the Taizé community took care of the singing. The Pope was in Turkey but wished to be present by way of a video message. He encouraged the religious of the entire world to regain the missionary spirit of Christ.
I repeat to you also today what I have said on other occasions. Wake up the world. Wake up the world. How? Go out of your nests towards the peripheries of the men and women of today. For this, let yourselves be met by Christ. The meeting with Him will push you out to the encounter with others and will carry you towards the most needy, the poorest. Reach the peripheries that await the light of the gospel. Live on the frontiers. This will require vigilance of you to discover the newness of the Spirit, lucidity to recognize the complexity of the new frontiers, discernment to identify the limits and the appropriate way to proceed, and immersion in the reality, touching the suffering flesh of Christ in people.
The next day in St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican's Minister for Religious Life, Cardinal João Braz de Aviz, celebrated Mass in place of the Holy Father. The year of consecrated life will be celebrated until February 2nd, 2016. During the first general audience of Advent, Pope Francis spoke about his recent trip to Turkey. He emphasized the importance of his visit to strengthen religious freedom in the country.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas,
Dear brothers and sisters, with joy I wish to recall the trip that I made to Turkey, a land so dear for so many reasons, linked to the history of Christianity. In the meeting with authorities, of which I appreciate the attention and respect with which they welcomed me, I had the opportunity to reaffirm the need for states to recognize the public relevance of religious faith and to guarantee everyone the freedom of worship. At the same time, I expressed the wish for Christians and Muslims to work together for solidarity, peace, and peaceful coexistence. Together with the pastors and the faithful of the different Catholic rites, we invoked the Holy Spirit so that the people of God, in the diversity of their traditions, grow in openness, docility, and obedience to His divine action. On the feast of St. Andrew the Apostle, I met with the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, His Holiness Bartholomew I, and together we signed a declaration renewing the commitment to continue along the path of restoration of full communion between Catholics and Orthodox, aware that prayer is the foundation for fruitful ecumenical dialogue.
After the break, the 20th anniversary of the International Year of the Family is marked at the UN. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano.
On the 20th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, Catholic NGOs and Caritas in Veritate Foundation met at the UN in Geneva. They're promoting the family as the source of strength and security for today's social challenges.
Conference was very good. We have hundreds of NGO that attended. The conference was on the celebration anniversary of the Family Convention, and was important from many points of view. The first one was remarkable, remembering that family life, natural family is the base of society. The natural evidence for any religion and belief, and it is also on the foundation of the Declaration of Human Rights. And how it's possible to join the common efforts from different religion and NGO in the world to promote, not only defend this basic human right, we can also come back and rebuild the new society and the new world that need to be changed.
During the conference, we spoke about family and children's rights, This year, in fact, we commemorate the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Convention on the Rights of the Child at the UN, and also it's the 20th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. So really two milestones that we talked about in the conference. And in the conference also it was much discussion of what is the role of the family and the children nowadays. What are the challenges, the opportunities in today's world?
We are calling for better social policies for families, but not substituting families, but working together with them. And in this way, we can support the resilience of families and people. That is, people in need are the first and more important resource to cope with their own problems. This is a new attitude since we had a long history of welfare state where the state was the only actor able to give answers to the needs of the people. But we are convinced that it is surely more important to help people to be free and help themselves.
The objectives of the conference are to examine the current challenges faced by families in today's society and to analyze good practices promoted by Catholic-inspired organizations to accompany families in promoting the common good. Liturgy as the climax and the source of the missionary life of the Church is the topic of this book that was presented in Roman, English, and Italian. 19 cardinals, bishops, professors, and specialists contributed to this unique piece of liturgical scholarship about the Mass as an evangelizing tool, also for the poor.
And evangelization is to help one person to discover the real presence, sacramental presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And so the place of the liturgy is very central. There is a distinction between a poor liturgy and a liturgy for the poor. I think the Curé d'Ars was a French saint, very well known, and he was saying the poor need the beauty of the liturgy. And so in the liturgy we receive all persons, but we give the bread of life for all the person, and all the person discover is hungry of God. And I have made this experience in my life, in my pastoral life, in my ministry, that the poor are very touched by a celebration with dignity, with a sense of a presence of God, with a good celebration of a mystery of the presence of Jesus.
It's the bishop that takes a prominent role in the liturgy.
He has to give one good example in the celebration, in the Ars Celebrandi. And I think also in the seminar, but also for permanent formation of priests, we have to give more and more a sense of the beauty of a liturgy.
Cardinal Burke also contributed to this book. He stated the importance of continuing the reform that was started by the Second Vatican Council.
The reform was hijacked by the so-called spirit of the Council and became detached from the actual teaching of the Council Fathers. And now for some time, through initiatives like Sacra Liturgia, the effort is being made to implement the reform as the Council wanted it, namely in continuity with the long tradition. In other words, not a rupture, not a revolution, but a reform that would be continuous, harmonious with the organic development of the liturgy down the centuries.
The ordinary form of the liturgy is paired with the extraordinary form, which Cardinal Burke recently celebrated during a pilgrimage in St. Peter's Basilica.
In my experience with the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, the participation is great, and the greater part of the participants are young people who never knew the old Mass, but when they participate in it are very much inspired by its beauty and drawn into a deeper spiritual life.
More conferences with authors are planned to take place in New York and in London next year.